July 18, 1944, Saipan, Mariana Islands. The morning mist clung to the dense jungle as Corporal Jack Mahoney led his patrol through terrain that could kill with every step. Behind him, 12 Marines moved in single file, their rifles ready, eyes scanning for the slightest movement that might betray a Japanese sniper or machine gun nest. The humid air carried the smell of rotting vegetation and something else, the metallic scent of buried death that pervaded every Pacific battlefield. 20 feet ahead of the patrol, a German shepherd named Rex moved with the focused intensity of a predator hunting prey. The dog's leather harness bore the number 5 in white paint, marking him as part of the 2nd Marine War Dog Platoon, one of the most classified units in the Pacific Theater. Rex's nose worked constantly, reading the air and ground for traces of explosives that Japanese engineers had buried throughout the island's interior. His training had prepared him to detect the chemical signatures of TNT, picric acid, and other explosives from distances that exceeded human capabilities by thousands of times. The patrol halted as Rex suddenly froze, his ears erect and tail rigid. The dog's body language communicated danger as clearly as any radio transmission, and Mahoney immediately signaled his men to stop. For 30 seconds, the jungle fell silent except for the distant rumble of artillery and the sound of Rex's controlled breathing as he processed scents that told a story of hidden death buried just beneath the innocent-looking earth. Rex backed away slowly, then sat and stared at a spot 15 yards ahead where the trail curved around a massive banyan tree. To human eyes, the path looked exactly like hundreds of other jungle tracks, muddy, covered with fallen leaves, unremarkable in every visible detail. But Rex's nose had detected the faint chemical trace of Japanese explosives buried 6 inches below the surface, positioned to destroy anyone who stepped on the concealed pressure plate. How do you fight an enemy who turns even animals into weapons of survival? Japanese defensive strategy in the Pacific Theater relied heavily on elaborate minefields, booby traps, and concealed explosive devices that transformed every advance into a deadly puzzle, where a single wrong step could destroy an entire squad. Japanese engineers had perfected techniques for hiding anti-personnel mines beneath natural-looking surfaces, while their artillery shells and aircraft bombs were converted into massive landmines capable of destroying tanks and killing dozens of soldiers simultaneously. The scale of Japanese mining operations on Pacific Islands was unprecedented in military history. On Saipan alone, Japanese forces had planted more than 10,000 individual mines and booby traps, ranging from small anti-personnel devices designed to maim individual soldiers to massive buried bombs capable of destroying entire vehicles. These weapons were concealed with such skill that American combat engineers often required hours to detect and neutralize traps that could be avoided entirely if their locations were known in advance. American casualties from Japanese mines and booby traps had reached crisis levels by 1943, with some Marine units suffering 40% losses before engaging enemy infantry. Traditional mine detection techniques using metal detectors and manual probing were slow, dangerous, and often ineffective against Japanese devices that used minimal metal components or were buried too deeply for conventional detection equipment to locate. The development of American war dog programs began in 1942 as a desperate response to mounting casualties from hidden explosives and ambushes. Military planners recognized that dogs possessed sensory capabilities that could detect threats invisible to human observation, while their natural instincts made them ideal for identifying danger before it could harm American forces. The first war dog training centers were established at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and Cat Island, Mississippi, where civilian dogs were transformed into military assets through intensive training programs. The selection process for war dogs was rigorous and scientific, with military veterinarians and animal behaviorists testing thousands of dogs for intelligence, physical capability, and psychological stability under combat conditions. German Shepherds were preferred for their size, intelligence, and natural protective instincts, while Dobermans proved excellent for guard duty and detection work. Even some collies and mixed breeds demonstrated exceptional abilities for specific tasks like message carrying and casualty location. Training programs for war dogs lasted 6 months and covered skills that included explosive detection, ambush recognition, message carrying, and casualty location. Dogs learned to identify the chemical signatures of various explosives through scent training that gradually exposed them to trace amounts of TNT, picric acid, and other military explosives. The training was so thorough that experienced war dogs could detect buried mines from distances exceeding 50 feet, providing advance warning that saved countless lives. The handlers selected for war dog units were chosen as carefully as the animals themselves. Marine volunteers underwent psychological testing to ensure they could form working relationships with dogs under combat stress, while their training covered animal behavior, basic veterinary care, and tactical employment of dogs in combat situations. The bond between handler and dog was considered essential for effectiveness, with many teams training together for months before deployment. The first Marine war dog platoons deployed to the Pacific in early 1943, arriving at Guadalcanal and Bougainville, where they immediately proved their value in detecting Japanese positions and explosives. Early combat reports documented cases where dogs had prevented casualties by detecting ambushes and mines that human scouts had missed entirely. The success of these initial deployments led to rapid expansion of war dog programs throughout the Pacific Theater. Japanese intelligence services were aware of American dog training programs, but consistently underestimated their effectiveness and deployment scale. Japanese commanders assumed that dogs would be used primarily for guard duty and communication, never suspecting that American forces had developed systematic techniques for employing dogs as explosive detection specialists capable of neutralizing entire minefields. The strategic implications of war dog deployment extended far beyond individual casualty prevention to fundamental changes in the pace and effectiveness of American offensive operations. Units equipped with war dogs could advance through dangerous terrain at speeds that would have been impossible using conventional mine detection techniques, while the psychological advantage of knowing that hidden dangers were being detected provided enormous morale benefits for American forces. American industrial capacity enabled mass production of specialized equipment for war dogs, including protective gear, communication equipment, and medical supplies specifically designed for canine use. The scale of this support infrastructure demonstrated American commitment to employing every possible advantage against Japanese defensive systems, including advantages that Japanese planners had never anticipated. The stage was set for a form of warfare that Japanese doctrine had never considered. American forces armed with dogs, trained to detect explosives and ambushes, would soon demonstrate that the most sophisticated defensive preparations could be neutralized by animals whose senses exceeded human capabilities by orders of magnitude. July 20th, 1944, 06:45 hours. Northern Saipan, approach to Mount Tapochau. First Lieutenant Robert Henderson's company had been tasked with clearing a suspected Japanese stronghold that dominated the island's interior, but reconnaissance had revealed that the entire approach route was likely mined with enough explosives to stop a battalion-sized assault, traditional mine clearing would require days of dangerous work by combat engineers, time that American forces couldn't afford while Japanese defenders strengthened their positions. Henderson's secret weapon trotted beside him on a standard military leash, a 3-year-old German shepherd named Duke, handled by Corporal Tommy Nakamura, a Japanese-American Marine whose language skills and dog-handling expertise made him invaluable for Pacific operations. Duke wore a standard military harness marked with the number 12 and carried equipment that included a first aid kit, radio, and emergency rations designed to sustain both dog and handler during extended operations. The approach to Mount Tapachao wound through dense jungle terrain that provided perfect concealment for Japanese mines and ambushes. Intelligence reports indicated that Japanese engineers had spent weeks preparing defensive positions along the route, using natural terrain features to conceal explosives that could destroy entire squads without warning. The task facing Henderson's company seemed impossible. Advance through a killing ground where every step could trigger destruction. Duke began working immediately as the company moved into the suspected minefield. The dog's nose swept constantly across the ground and air, processing chemical information that revealed the story of Japanese defensive preparations with precision that amazed his handlers. Within minutes, Duke had detected the first mine, a buried 75mm artillery shell converted into an anti-personnel device and concealed beneath innocuous-looking jungle debris. Nakamura watched Duke's body language with the intensity of a doctor reading medical instruments. When the dog's ears came forward and his tail went rigid, Nakamura knew that Duke had detected something requiring investigation. When Duke backed away and sat while staring at a specific location, Nakamura understood that deadly explosives lay hidden exactly where Duke indicated. The communication between handler and dog had reached levels of precision that enabled split-second decisions under combat conditions. The first mine Duke detected was exactly where Japanese engineers had calculated American forces would naturally step when navigating around a fallen tree. The explosive device was buried 6 inches deep and connected to a pressure plate concealed beneath natural debris, positioned to destroy anyone who used the obvious path through the jungle. Combat engineers who examined the mine after Duke's detection confirmed that it would have killed at least 6 Marines and wounded twice as many. As Henderson's company continued its advance, Duke detected mine after mine with consistency that transformed the impossible mission into a manageable tactical problem. The dog's nose led him to Japanese explosives concealed under logs, buried beneath natural-looking ground cover, and hidden in tree stumps that had been hollowed out to contain deadly surprises. Each detection prevented casualties that would have devastated American offensive capabilities. The psychological impact on American forces was immediate and profound. Marines who had approached the mission with dread found themselves advancing with confidence, trusting Duke's nose to reveal dangers they couldn't see or imagine. The knowledge that hidden explosives were being detected before they could cause harm provided psychological advantages that multiplied American tactical effectiveness beyond the simple prevention of casualties. Japanese defensive preparations that had required weeks of engineering work were being systematically neutralized by a dog whose training had cost less than a single artillery shell. Duke's nose could detect chemical traces from Japanese explosives at distances that enabled safe approach to mines that could then be marked for later destruction by combat engineers. The efficiency was remarkable. An entire minefield could be mapped and neutralized in hours rather than days. The tactical revolution became apparent as Henderson's company advanced through terrain that should have been impassable. Duke detected not only mines, but also the scent traces of Japanese soldiers who had positioned the explosives, providing intelligence about enemy numbers, positions, and recent activity that proved invaluable for planning subsequent operations. The dog's nose was providing information that no human reconnaissance could obtain. Japanese defenders watching the American advance through concealed positions couldn't understand why their carefully prepared minefields were being avoided with supernatural accuracy. American forces seemed to possess knowledge of mine locations that Japanese engineers assumed was impossible to obtain. The defensive preparations that should have stopped American forces entirely were being bypassed, as if American commanders possessed detailed maps of every explosive device. Duke's detection capabilities extended beyond conventional mines to Japanese booby traps that used tripwires, concealed grenades, and other improvised explosive devices. The dog's nose could detect chemical traces from explosives regardless of their type or method of concealment, providing comprehensive protection against Japanese defensive techniques that relied on surprise and concealment. No Japanese explosive device could escape detection by sensors that operated on molecular levels. The advance that Japanese planners had calculated would require days of bloody fighting was completed in less than 8 hours, with Duke preventing what intelligence estimates suggested would have been more than 200 American casualties. The dog's performance demonstrated capabilities that exceeded every optimistic projection from war dog training programs, proving that animal senses could provide tactical advantages that human technology couldn't match. Henderson's after-action report documented Duke's detection of 37 individual mines and booby traps, each of which would have caused multiple casualties if triggered during the advance. The statistical impact was staggering. A single dog had prevented losses that would have crippled American offensive operations while enabling rapid advance through terrain that Japanese engineers had assumed would be impassable. The strategic implications became clear as similar successes were reported throughout the Pacific Theater. American forces equipped with war dogs were advancing through Japanese defensive positions with speed and minimal casualties that exceeded anything achieved through conventional tactics. The dogs were transforming Pacific warfare by neutralizing Japanese advantages that had been carefully planned and meticulously executed. Within days of Duke's success on Saipan, reports of war dog effectiveness began circulating through American command channels with excitement that bordered on disbelief. Marine commanders who had expected heavy casualties from Japanese minefields instead reported advances completed with losses so minimal they seemed impossible. Word spread quickly through combat units that dogs could provide protection against hidden dangers that had terrorized American forces since the beginning of Pacific operations. The psychological transformation among American forces was immediate and profound. Marines who had approached every patrol with dread of invisible explosives suddenly felt protected by capabilities that seemed almost supernatural. Corporal Mike Sullivan, serving with the 4th Marine Division, wrote to his family, "We got these dogs now that can smell trouble before we step in it. It's like having guardian angels with fur and 4 legs. The guys who work with them say those dogs have saved more lives than all our medics combined." Japanese defensive planning underwent emergency revision as intelligence reports indicated that American forces had somehow acquired capabilities for detecting concealed explosives with precision that defied explanation. Japanese engineers began questioning fundamental assumptions about mine warfare, wondering how American forces could consistently avoid traps that had been positioned with mathematical precision to channel attackers into killing zones. American tactical doctrine evolved rapidly as successful war dog operations demonstrated capabilities that exceeded the most optimistic planning projections. Combat units began requesting war dog support for every operation involving suspected minefields or ambush sites, while training programs expanded to produce additional dog teams capable of supporting increased operational demands. The success rate was so consistently high that war dogs became standard equipment for dangerous missions. Medical reports from Pacific combat zones documented dramatic reductions in casualties from mines and booby traps in areas where war dogs operated. Hospital ships that had routinely treated dozens of blast injuries daily reported cases dropping to single digits when war dog units were employed for mine detection. The statistical evidence was undeniable. Dogs were preventing casualties on scales that transformed American offensive capabilities. Japanese commanders began receiving reports that described American forces advancing through minefields as if they possessed detailed knowledge of every explosive device location. These reports, initially dismissed as combat exaggeration, gradually accumulated into intelligence patterns that demanded explanation. Japanese staff officers struggled to develop theories that could account for American capabilities that seemed to exceed human limitations. American war dog programs expanded rapidly as success in the Pacific demonstrated capabilities that justified massive resource allocation. Training facilities increased production of dog teams from dozens to hundreds monthly, while specialized equipment for canine operations received high priority for development and manufacturing. The industrial scale of war dog support reflected American commitment to exploiting every possible advantage against Japanese defensive systems. The cultural impact within American forces was profound as stories of life-saving dogs spread through units throughout the Pacific theater. Marines began viewing war dogs not as equipment, but as fellow Marines whose contributions exceeded those of many human personnel. The bond between American forces and their dogs created morale advantages that extended far beyond the immediate tactical benefits of explosive detection. Japanese attempts to counter American war dog capabilities proved futile because Japanese intelligence never accurately identified the specific nature of American advantages. Japanese countermeasures focused on improving mine concealment and developing new explosive devices while missing the fundamental issue. American dogs could detect any chemical explosive regardless of concealment method or device type. Allied forces worldwide began requesting American war dog teams as reports of Pacific successes reached other theaters. British and Australian commanders sought access to American training programs and equipment, recognizing that war dog capabilities could provide significant advantages against German and Italian defensive systems. The international demand for American war dog expertise exceeded available supply by enormous margins. American industrial capacity enabled mass production of specialized equipment for war dogs that included protective gear, communication devices, and medical supplies designed specifically for canine use. The economic investment in war dog support infrastructure demonstrated American willingness to pursue any technological advantage that could reduce casualties while improving operational effectiveness. The strategic implications became apparent as American offensive operations in the Pacific accelerated dramatically due to reduced casualties and faster advance rates through previously dangerous terrain. Islands that Japanese planners had assumed would require months to capture fell to American forces equipped with war dogs in weeks, fundamentally altering the timeline of Pacific campaign planning. Japanese morale declined as reports circulated describing American capabilities that seemed to transcend normal human limitations. Japanese soldiers who had confidence in their defensive preparations found themselves questioning weapons and tactics that American forces consistently defeated through methods that remained mysterious and unexplainable. The statistical transformation was documented through detailed casualty reports that showed reductions in mine-related injuries exceeding 80% in units supported by war dogs. These numbers reflected not just tactical success, but strategic advantages that enabled American forces to maintain offensive momentum that Japanese defensive planning had been designed to prevent. American war dog operations established precedents for animal-assisted military operations that would influence doctrine for decades. The success of Pacific war dogs proved that properly trained animals could provide capabilities that complemented and exceeded human limitations, establishing principles that guided military animal programs throughout subsequent conflicts. The overwhelming success of war dogs in Pacific operations triggered systematic expansion of American military animal programs that established the United States as the world leader in combat animal training and deployment. By late 1944, American war dog training facilities were producing more than 200 trained dog teams monthly, while research programs developed specialized equipment and techniques that maximized animal capabilities in combat environments. American military doctrine underwent fundamental revision as war dog effectiveness demonstrated that animal-assisted operations could provide tactical advantages unavailable through conventional technology. The integration of dogs into standard combat units required new communication procedures, logistical support systems, and tactical techniques that treated animal capabilities as essential components of combined arms operations rather than supplementary assets. The technological innovations developed for war dog support included specialized protective equipment, communication gear designed for animal handlers, and medical supplies adapted for field veterinary care under combat conditions. American industrial capacity enabled mass production of these specialized items while simultaneously developing improved training techniques that reduced preparation time while improving animal performance. Japanese attempts to develop countermeasures against American war dog operations proved unsuccessful because Japanese intelligence never accurately understood the scope and capabilities of American animal programs. Japanese defensive modifications focused on improving explosive concealment and developing new mine types while missing the fundamental issue. Properly trained dogs could detect any chemical explosive regardless of type or concealment method. The strategic implications extended beyond immediate tactical advantages to fundamental questions about resource allocation and technological development. American war dog programs demonstrated that relatively modest investments in animal training could provide capabilities that exceeded expensive technological solutions, establishing principles that influenced military planning throughout the Cold War and beyond. American research programs developed scientific understanding of animal sensory capabilities that advanced knowledge in fields ranging from behavioral psychology to chemical detection technology. The practical requirements of war dog training drove innovations in scent detection, animal communication, and behavioral conditioning that had applications extending far beyond military operations. The economic analysis of war dog operations revealed cost advantages that amazed military planners accustomed to expensive technological solutions. The total cost of training and deploying a war dog team was less than the price of a single artillery shell, while the casualties prevented by dog operations would have required medical resources worth millions of dollars to treat. International implications became apparent as allied nations worldwide requested access to American war dog training programs and techniques. The global demand for American animal training expertise established American leadership in military animal operations that persisted throughout subsequent decades while providing diplomatic advantages through technical assistance programs. Post-war analysis revealed that American war dog operations had achieved tactical advantages that exceeded Japanese comprehension during active combat operations. Japanese commanders never understood how American forces had neutralized defensive preparations that had required enormous engineering effort and resources, attributing American success to technological advantages that didn't actually exist. The research infrastructure developed for war dog programs established capabilities that influenced American military animal operations throughout subsequent conflicts. The training facilities, veterinary programs, and behavioral research capabilities created for Pacific operations became the foundation for specialized military units that continued operating long after World War II ended. The lessons learned from war dog deployment influenced American military thinking about technological integration, force multiplication, and unconventional capabilities. American commanders recognized that animal abilities could provide unique advantages that conventional technology couldn't match, establishing principles that guided military innovation for generations. The transformation of American war dogs from experimental programs into essential combat assets demonstrated the power of unconventional thinking to overcome seemingly impossible tactical challenges. Japanese engineers who had spent months creating elaborate defensive minefields discovered that their most sophisticated preparations could be neutralized by animals whose natural abilities exceeded any human technology available during World War II. The irony was historically profound and strategically decisive. Japanese forces that had relied on concealment and surprise found themselves defeated by American capabilities they had never imagined possible. The mines that were supposed to stop American advances became useless obstacles that could be avoided through the superior senses of dogs whose training had transformed natural instincts into military weapons. The human dimension of this transformation revealed the profound bonds that developed between American forces and their canine partners. Marines who had feared invisible death in every jungle path suddenly trusted their lives to animals whose loyalty and capability exceeded that of many human comrades. The psychological impact was immense. American forces were no longer fighting alone against hidden dangers. The strategic implications extended far beyond immediate tactical success to fundamental questions about innovation, adaptation, and the nature of military advantage. American success with war dogs proved that creative thinking about natural capabilities could provide solutions to problems that expensive technology couldn't address, establishing principles that would guide military innovation for decades. The ultimate testament to American success lay in Japanese inability to understand or counter capabilities that seemed to transcend normal human limitations. Japanese intelligence services never accurately identified the role of war dogs in American tactical success, attributing American achievements to technological advantages that didn't exist rather than animal capabilities they had never considered. In the jungles of the Pacific, the sharpest weapon wasn't steel or fire, it was the nose of a dog. Stories like this reveal how American innovation extended beyond technology to embrace every possible advantage, proving that victory could come from the most unexpected sources when guided by creative thinking and proper training. In the next episode, we'll explore another hidden American capability that caught enemy forces completely unprepared. Would you have trusted an animal with your life? Subscribe now to uncover more untold stories of World War II.